Happy Monday, comrades. It's April 1st, 2019, and this is your Daily Detroit. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Today we're talking about the Detroit Tigers and Opening Day. Opening Day is basically a holiday in Detroit, and we thought we'd give you a preview of both the upcoming season and the festivities.
First, we'll talk about the team and their prospects ahead of Detroit's home opener. Chris Brown from the Locked On Tigers podcast called in to preview the 2019 campaign.
Second, we'll talk fun. If you're partaking of the revelry on Thursday, our man about town, Devon O'Reilly, has some picks. And what's great about these is even if you're not going downtown or cutting out work early on Thursday to hop into the fun, you can check out these places most times before or after games. But first, a word from a sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you in part by our friends at Milo Digital. Milo Digital is a full-service digital marketing agency that engineers quality results through data and innovative strategies. Learn more at milodetroit.com.
Joining us to size up the Detroit Tigers 2019 edition is Chris Brown. He's host of Locked On Tigers, which is part of the Locked On podcast network. Chris also writes for Tigs Town, which focuses on the Tigers minor leagues. Chris, welcome to Daily Detroit. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So the Tigers have the first series in the books against Toronto. They split with the Blue Jays 2 games apiece. Both of Detroit's wins came in extra innings, but they scored exactly 0 runs in the 2 losses. What did we learn about Detroit from the first 4 games? Anything surprise you or stand out?
It was a little bit opposite of what I expected this year. This year I expect their pitching to be pretty bad and their offense to be okay, and it was just not the case this weekend. Their pitching was actually really good, but their offense was abysmal. And I don't know if we actually learned that that's the way it's going to be.
Hard to judge anything on 4 games, right?
Yeah, but early indications weren't great. I kind of am skeptical. I think maybe some of that was just coming right back from spring training and not really the hitters not being up to game speed still. But I don't know. We'll see.
So let's talk about that pitching staff. First of all, the Tigers have lost, I believe, for the season, Michael Fulmer, right, to a bad pitching elbow.
Yeah, he tore his partial tear of one of his ligaments in his elbow. So they had the surgery already, and he's out for at least a year, probably more like next July is a good time to think of him coming back.
Yeah. So what's the rest of the rotation look like?
Well, now they've got Jordan Zimmerman, who they paid a lot of money to the other 3 years ago, and he actually had a great first start. Behind him is Tyson Ross, who they signed this offseason, and Matt Moore, who they also signed this offseason, and then Matthew Boyd, who they acquired around the same time as Michael Fulmer, and then Spencer Turnbull, who is they brought him up from the minor leagues. Not a ton of familiar names, I think, to Tigers fans. There's not a lot of talent there either. You could squint and some things will go right. Like with Zimmerman had a great start, I said. Matt Moore had a great start, which was kind of unexpected. But as a whole, I think it's going to be kind of a down unit for the team this year.
What about on the offensive production? Where are Tigers going to get hits and runs from, do you think?
Well, I think the top of the lineup is actually okay. Miguel Cabrera is back. He hasn't done any real damage in the regular season yet. And I don't think this is, MVP level Cabrera, but he looks pretty good. And I think he'll be the driving force of the offense again this year. But Nick Castellanos is coming off the best year of his career, and he's back. And then, I kind of expect better things from Jeimer Candelario this year. He got off to a really hot start last year, their third baseman, Jeimer Candelario, and he kind of faltered down the stretch. And he just on Sunday, he had a 5-hit game, which was a new career high. I wouldn't expect that every game, of course, but so I think those 3 will help. And Kristen Stewart is a guy they brought up from the minors at the end of last year, and it's still too early to tell what kind of major leaguer he's going to be, but he's got a lot of power, and in the minors he showed a lot of patience, so he could be another solid offensive piece there. But yeah, it's really just 4 or 5 guys, and then the bottom of the lineup looks pretty grim.
Lots of new names on this year's roster. Any of them, you mentioned Kristen Stewart. Anybody else who you think might be bright lights people might want to watch, keep an eye on?
Well, they got rid of their catcher, James McCann. They didn't send him an offer, and they brought up Grayson Greiner, who I don't think he's going to blow people away with his offensive production this year. It is kind of noteworthy. He will be the tallest regular catcher in Major League history. He's 6'6". Uh, and normally that's not a good thing because you're kind of in the way of the umpire. But he manages to get pretty low back there, and he's a really solid defender. But that's, casual fans, I don't think they're going to pick up on that too much, and he'll be lucky to hit like 250 this year. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's not a ton, at least to start the year. There's not a ton of young, exciting hitters aside from Candelario and Stewart. We may see a few later in the season, in the likes of Daz Cameron, but it's tough to say.
Yeah. Obviously very early, so everything is speculative at this point, but the Tigers are still in the middle of kind of rebuilding mode and everything. Do they have pieces, that they could offer as trade bait to try to get better, or are they sort of not even really thinking in those terms right now?
I'm sure they would still like to trade Nicholas Castellanos. They were trying to trade him all off season, and they never got a deal to their liking. And beyond that, though, they really don't have much in the way of trade chips anymore. They traded their big ones in J.D. Martinez and Justin Verlander and then Justin Upton and Ian Kinsler. I think they were kind of hoping that if Michael Fulmer had a really good year, that they could either flip him for a nice package of prospects or maybe, count on him to be the centerpiece of the next contender. But that kind of went down the drain with his injury. So, yeah, aside from Castellanos, it's possible Matthew Boyd has a good year and they could trade him. And then the two guys they signed in the offseason, the pitchers, Tyson Ross and Matt Moore, I think they're really hoping they can get good first half out of those guys and then trade them. But I'm a little bit skeptical that'll happen.
Tigers are 2-2 so far. Long season to go. Obviously, are you making any kind of projections? Like how will the Tigers fare this year?
I think they're going to win about 68 games, which is 4 games better than last year, but still not very good. They will be in contention for last place in the division again. It's not a good division at all. The Royals are also rebuilding. The White Sox are maybe a step ahead of the Tigers in their rebuild, but you got 3 teams that aren't really trying in the division. Upper 60s in terms of wins, but it could go 5 wins either way just based on the lack of quality in the division.
Who does that leave to contend for the Central Division then, you think?
Well, most people are picking the Indians just because they have the strength of a really good pitching staff and 2 superstars in the infield. But oddly enough, they didn't really do much that made it seem like they're trying this year either. They're kind of just coasting on their good team from last year. And the Twins have a decent shot at making a run at it this year. They have they actually were trying, and they have some prospects they might be able to bring up later in the year. But it's basically a race between those 2 teams.
Yeah. So it sounds like from a sporting perspective, kind of a ho-hum season for the Tigers. What's your pitch to people for why they should shell out and go down to Comerica Park to take in the ball games? I mean, you tried any good new snacks at the stadium or anything this year yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, and that's the thing. Baseball I think is the most. I mean, obviously I'm a huge baseball fan, but baseball I think is the most enjoyable spectator sport because you can kind of go and not necessarily even pay attention that much. It's the game's leisurely enough that you can, pay attention for one batter and then wait 2 minutes and then see the ball in play. But and really, even when we're talking about, if you're really just concerned about them winning or losing, you still have, like, even with the worst Tigers team, you've got like a 40% chance that you're going to see a win. So those odds aren't all that bad. And when they're really good, you've only got like a 60% chance they're going to win. So I think it's a good time to go down there and just enjoy the sights and the sounds and the smells. It's a very, sensory game to me.
Chris Brown is host of Locked On Tigers, a daily show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show and breaking down the team for us this year.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Over a couple of coffees on a sunny afternoon here, I am with Devon O'Reilly. He is our man about town, joining us in the Detroit Shipping Company studios for a chat. Devon, how are you today?
I'm feeling great, Jer.
Well, it's almost opening day, and that is an exciting time in Detroit. It is basically a holiday in this town.
It's one of the truly Detroit holidays, I'd say. I think that people who haven't kind of lived or been outside in other cities don't realize that, like, this is a special thing in Detroit. This isn't every MLB city has an opening day with this much pageantry and fanfare. It's very rare. I mean, we're in the same category as like a Boston or a Chicago or a St. Louis who like really do their opening days big. Not everywhere does that.
Well, and I'd note all those cities have had teams for quite a long time.
Yeah, this is obviously the opening day festivities for Detroit go back, as far as any of our traditions, really.
So I think we'll break this conversation into two parts. I think first, I want to talk about some of the fun places to go around town. There are plenty of venues around Detroit that will be flinging their doors open for opening day. But Devon, I think we wanted to take a minute and focus on a few that will be the most fun or the most entertaining, the ones that will bring the biggest value for your buck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a mix of some new offerings and some classic ones that those that come down here annually for opening day are familiar with. So, one of the ones got to throw out there is Nancy Whiskey's. That's the classic, right?
Oh, of course.
So, Nancy Whiskey's in North Corktown, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, I think it's officially North Corktown. Yeah, Harrison Street, right?
It's like the only bar in North Corktown, really.
I think you're right.
Yeah, North Corktown's been very deliberate about not having a lot of commercial development. So Nancy Whiskey's was kind of grandfathered or grandmothered in there, as it were. So that's a classic. As we were kind of talking before, the way I said it was, Nancy Whiskey's going to have the real diehard fans, the people who remember the 84 championship, the people who were there for the 84 championship in the stands. That's your crowd at Nancy Whiskey's, so it'll be great.
One of the great things about Nancy Whiskey's, too, is that it's one of the oldest bars in the city. I mean, it's contested which bar is the oldest. Many point to Two-Way Inn. That's kind of where I lean. But it is a great time. There is the patio out back. They always tend to have all the beers ready to go. It's not a fancy place, per se. This is not the kind of place where you are going to order a 4-ingredient cocktail.
No, but they have plenty of whiskey, as the name might suggest. And, it's opening day, so you should be okay with your Bud Lights, your Miller Lights, and your shots of Tullamore Dew, which they have plenty of.
So first we talked about an older place. Let's talk about a newer place. Right here at the Detroit Shipping Company is a new entrant into the opening day game. That's opening up actually at 8 a.m. And the thing I like about that is that there is no cover on this. And they have an option for parking spots if you're coming in from outside of downtown somewhere to park, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no cover is rare for some of these big parties, as you'll see or as we'll talk about. A lot of them do have cover, so the fact they have no cover is great. There's plenty of places to get a drink from. It's a big open area. You might want to shy away from the small, kind of tiny bars on opening day because they're going to be packed, four deep at the rail trying to get a drink. So a place like the Shipping Container here, you'll probably be able to take advantage of having a much more kind of open environment to grab a drink. They got big TVs. They'll have the game on. It should be a great place, and the shuttles make it perfect to kind of shoot back downtown if you want to head that way.
What do you think of one of the places that we recently talked about on the show? The Brakeman is a new opening day entrant.
I think the Brakeman's going to do just fine on opening day. It's a pretty large space. They do the whole beer token concept thing, which is interesting. They don't have a huge selection of beers, so don't go there again thinking you're going to get a great selection of beers. I think there's 8 on tap. They don't really have a cocktail menu. They don't really have any wine. So it's pretty straightforward, but they do have games. They've got beer pong. They've got the shuffleboard games. It's definitely going to be a lively atmosphere, and it'll definitely attract a good crowd for opening day. So that'll be a new one to look out for.
Well, what are a couple of your favorites?
So, I always love the Town Pump, which for those of you who might not know
Wasn't that closed, though, recently?
It did close recently and has actually opened up just across the street. So if you know the area, the old Centaur Bar, which was just across the street, has now been reincarnated as the Town Pump. So Town Pump is back in business. They always have a great party. They get the tent out there. So Town Pump has always been a favorite of mine to check out. If the weather improves a little bit on what it's looking like it's going to be.
50s, right? Is what we're thinking. Top 40, upper hoping. 40s, lower 50s.
Let's hope for 50. 50 would be the magic number to try and hit. But if we can get there, they always do the big party in Grand Circus Park. So there's tents, there's music, there's DJs all day long. That's always cool to stroll on through. You could find your way over to places like Queens, although there's not a TV, so you want to go there before the game. It's a great spot. You've also got the belt that they have now. So the skip and standby will be open. So I'm sure a lot of people will kind of take to the belt that's nearby Comerica. You can walk there.
The skip is really cool, too, because it opens out into that alleyway, and it's just a great party experience where you can wander in, have a drink, do your thing, and then move on to another stop if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes for a great stop if you're, especially I think on opening day. Most people like to kind of bounce around to different places, so it helps you do that. Of course, Hockey Town is always kind of a beacon on opening day. The line out there starts at like before 9 a.m. Probably. I've been there at 9 a.m. and waited in line.
That's crazy to me. I'm not sure, but I'm not a wait in line kind of guy.
If you get there early enough, you don't have to. But yeah, Hockey Town is 4 levels actually. I think it's a huge place. They do have a cover, so I think the idea would be to get there early because they will have a cover at Hockey Town. I even saw that 4th Street Galley, which is a newcomer, is doing some opening day festivities. So they're big dining hall space. They've got a huge bar, big kind of U-shaped bar. So that'll be a good one to check out.
How do you like 4th Street in general?
I like it. I think that they've got the four food concepts. I would imagine they're gonna switch those out often. I think the idea there. They've got a good mix of different types of foods, and then they recently launched the bar concept. So when they first launched, it was just a long bar, which was cool. But now it has a personality. It's called Magpie. So it has its own cocktail menu, interesting drinks. So they're trying to, has DJs on the weekend. So they're trying to bring more of a kind of a personality to that space. And I like it. I mean, that you need something in that area that kind of caters to both a lunch crowd and an after work drinks crowd.
One of the things I have learned reveling for opening day, at least in the past, is that sometimes food can be a hard thing to get a hold of.
For sure, especially as it gets later in the day and you want the food more, but it's also harder to come by.
So Moots, which recently opened there on Library Street, I believe, by the Detroit Public Library. It's on the other side of the belt. They're actually doing $5 grab-and-go slices, and they have beer and wine and things like that too. But I like the idea that there might be a few more windows where you can just grab something, head out the door, keep on your way, and keep the party going.
That's the type of situation you're going to find yourself on, I'm sure, on opening day. As the day drags on, you'll want to grab a slice, you'll want to get some food. Moots would be a great place to do that. Shout out to Slices as well on Woodward.
Slices is great. They don't have booze, but if you want a better value, you can hit Slices and you get a really good deal.
Yeah. So shout out to Slices, one of my local pizzeria. So you're gonna want to try and chow down on some food as it gets later on. I know Founders also has tons of food, tons of space. They got the heat lamps, or not the heat lamps, actually the fire and the heat lamps, so you can stay warm on the Founders patio. And they're gonna have some events. They'll have music all day, beer specials.
So we've talked about a few of the different places to hang out at that we like, but we're both people who live in the city. So as much as we love all of the attention and folks coming downtown, there's also kind of a not so fun side about opening day, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there can be. It's a huge party in downtown Detroit, which is fun. That's great. It's just important for people to remember that people also live there too. And so as some people kind of pack up and go home or stumble their way out of town, you don't want to trash the city on your way out. So I think both of us would kindly ask people to respect and obey a few kind of general rules of opening day. The first being not to trash the streets.
Oh, that's an important one. And have the same respect for the town as you would your own neighborhood. And I say this personally, as at one time I found someone literally urinating on my front door.
Yes, I've seen multiple acts of public urination on opening day. So that happens, unfortunately, quite frequently.
So don't do that. Don't be that guy.
So that's the obvious one, right? I mean, I'd like to even point out some simple, more subtle ones, like cutting in line at the bathroom. The way the bathrooms are set up on opening day, there's lines everywhere. That's a cardinal sin, cutting in line at the bathroom for opening day, because everybody's got to go. You're not any more important. Parking illegally, I mean, parking down here is no joke now. $45 ticket, $650 ticket if you're parking on the queue line rails.
If you do a little bit of planning, you don't have to worry about parking that much. If we talked about the Detroit Shipping Company, I know there's other lots you can pre-reserve. And then the other thing to think about, if you're going to be coming down here, parking would be really expensive anyway. Maybe you should think about doing like ride share, like Uber or Lyft.
Absolutely. I would highly, highly suggest just doing a ride share. I mean, of course, you can kind of have a DD to come down here, but you're better off just doing the ride share option, and you don't have to worry about that.
Well, and a cool little promotion, the folks over at Wallside Windows, if you do the code Wallside 2019-2019, and no, we don't get anything from this. We're just sharing this because it's good news. It's good information to have. They will pay for half of your ride, which is pretty sweet. Half of your ride on the way home.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's a great thing to take advantage of. There's going to be a lot of kind of mayhem in the street. So the more you can avoid that is probably better. And make sure you follow the game. I think some people just get caught up in the opening day and forget what we're really down here for, and that's to watch the Tigers play baseball. They've already had a couple wins, so this is going to be exciting.
We're actually 500 right now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit different than years past. The last couple of years, as we're coming in with already a couple wins under our belt. So there's a little bit of momentum. So let's not forget that this is a baseball game, and make sure you watch it. I know people who are either in their beds or blacked out on the floor somewhere before the game even starts, and that's not the way to do opening day.
All right, friends, thanks so much for listening to Daily Detroit. If you like our show, be sure to tell a friend to help us push Detroit's conversation forward. I'm Sven Gustafson.
And I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.